Welcome to Facts Radio, your journey through history begins here. In this episode, we explore Rosa Parks and the Montgomery Bus Boycott, a pivotal moment where quiet dignity ignited a flame of resistance, forever altering the landscape of American civil rights. It is the story of how an entire community, driven by frustration and fortified by faith, stood up to decades of systemic oppression, proving that the most profound revolutions often begin with a single, resolute no. This is not just history, it is the genesis of modern equality. Chapter 1: The Weight of Jim Crow. The year is 1955. The place is Montgomery, Alabama, a city draped in the humid air of the Deep South, where the oppressive heat was matched only by the suffocating weight of Jim Crow laws. These were not mere social customs, they were codified, brutal instruments of segregation that dictated every facet of life, from water fountains to courtrooms. For black citizens, every day was a negotiation with humiliation, a constant, grinding reminder of their second-class status. The rules were clear, and their enforcement was often violent. The city's public transit system, the Montgomery City Lines, was a daily crucible of this racial hierarchy. Black riders, who made up the majority of the bus clientele, were forced to board in the front to pay their fare, then exit and reboard through the back door. Imagine the tension as you watched the white driver, holding your money, sometimes drive away before you could step back on. It's hard to believe, but this routine public slight was the norm, a calculated insult baked into the very act of travel. The buses were divided into distinct zones, the white section at the front, and the black section toward the rear. Between these two areas lay the colored section, but even here, the rules were enforced by a chilling and arbitrary power. If the white section filled up, a black person was required by law to surrender their seat to a white passenger, or even worse, to stand if no seats were available. This was known as moving back, a gesture of submission that ground down the spirit with every mile traveled. Rosa Parks knew this landscape intimately. She was a seamstress, a quiet, dignified woman, but also an active member and youth leader in the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Her composure belied a deep, seasoned frustration with the indignities she faced daily. She was not a random figure, she was a woman steeped in the tradition of civil rights activism, trained in the methods of nonviolent resistance at the Highlander Folk School just months prior. Her quiet strength was the calm before the storm. Chapter 2, December 1st, 1955. The defining moment on the afternoon of Thursday, December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks finished her long day of work at the Montgomery Fair Department store and boarded the Cleveland Avenue bus. She settled into the first seat of the colored section, a 4-seat row just behind the section reserved for whites. For a brief moment, she felt a sliver of peace, the exhaustion of the day settling in her bones. She wasn't looking for a confrontation, she was just looking to go home. As the bus proceeded along its route, the white section quickly filled up. At the third stop, near the Empire Theater, several white passengers boarded. The bus driver, James F. Blake, noticing the full front section, walked back and demanded that the 4 black passengers in Parks's row surrender their seats so that one white man could sit down. This common occurrence was suddenly infused with extraordinary significance. The 3 other black passengers complied and stood. But Rosa Parks remained seated. She adjusted her posture, not out of stubbornness, but out of a deep, unshakable sense of her own worth. Imagine the tension in that metal tube, the smell of diesel and sweat, as every eye fixed on her. Blake asked her again, "Are you going to stand up?" Her reply was simple, clear, and utterly revolutionary, no. She wasn't refusing a seat, she was refusing to participate in her own degradation any longer. Blake threatened to call the police, to which Parks simply replied, "You may do that." This defiance was the spark the movement needed. It was a refusal rooted not in legal argument, but in moral exhaustion. The police arrived, and without a struggle, Rosa Parks was arrested for violating Chapter 6, Section 11 of the Montgomery City Code. Her booking photo, a study in quiet resolve, would soon become the face of a national movement. Chapter 3, The Gathering Storm. Organizing the boycott, news of Rosa Parks's arrest did not stay quiet for long. It spread like wildfire through the city's black community, carried by phone calls and whispers between churches and community centers. For years, activists had been searching for the perfect test case to challenge the bus laws, a person with impeccable character who could withstand the inevitable legal scrutiny and public vitriol. They knew, instantly, they had found her. That very evening, E.D. Nixon, a veteran civil rights activist and former president of the Montgomery NAACP, telephoned a young, recently arrived minister, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The time for planning had come. The initial concept was simple, a one-day bus boycott for Monday, December 5, the day of Parks's trial. The goal was to demonstrate the economic power of the black community and demand a change to the humiliating seating policy. The organizational machine sprung into action. Joe Ann Robinson, a professor and leader of the Women's Political Council, WPC, worked through the night, using the mimeograph machine at the Alabama State College to print an estimated 35,000 handbills calling for the boycott. These leaflets were distributed in secret, passed out at schools, in barbershops, and hand-delivered to every black church in the city before dawn broke on Sunday. The message was clear: another woman has been arrested and thrown in jail because she refused to give up her bus seat. Come to a mass meeting Monday at 7 p.m. at the Holt Street Baptist Church for further instruction. The community, long simmering with resentment, responded with immediate and unified purpose. The Sunday sermons were not about abstract theology, they were about justice and dignity, culminating in a single, powerful call to action: stay off the buses. Chapter 4: Monday morning and the MIA is formed. The morning of Monday, December 5, 1955, was epochal. City officials and bus company executives expected a hiccup, perhaps a 10% drop in ridership. What they witnessed was a profound, citywide silence. The buses rolled through the black neighborhoods, rattling and sputtering, but they were almost entirely empty. People walked miles in the drizzling rain, domestics, laborious, teachers, and students, all sharing the common burden and the common purpose. The level of participation was astonishing, reaching nearly 99% of the black ridership. Carpool sprung up spontaneously, fueled by church vans and private cars, creating a complex, makeshift transportation network. Drivers ran routes, picking up and dropping off walkers, transforming the morning commute into a powerful, visible protest. It was an immediate, overwhelming success that stunned both the boycotters and the white establishment. At 1:30 p.m., Rosa Parks was found guilty of violating the segregation law and was fined $10 plus $4 in court costs. The verdict, though expected, solidified the activists' resolve. The one-day protest had to become something more permanent. E.D. Nixon, Dr. King, and other leaders met that afternoon to formalize the effort. They formed the Montgomery Improvement Association, MIA, to sustain and direct the boycott. The group elected Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., just 26 years old and relatively unknown, as its president. King's powerful oratory and moral clarity made him the ideal spokesperson for the long road ahead. The challenge was immense, but the energy was palpable. The first mass meeting was scheduled for that evening, and every organizer knew the city of Montgomery was about to change forever. Chapter 5: The Voice of the Movement. The Holt Street Baptist Church that Monday night was overflowing, a visual testament to the community's resolve. Thousands of people, men, women, and children, packed the sanctuary, spilled into the basement, and gathered in a dense crowd outside, listening through loudspeakers that crackled in the cold December air. It was more than a meeting, it was a revival of purpose, a collective declaration that fear would no longer dictate their movements. The electricity in the air was undeniable, a palpable mix of indignation and hope. E.D. Nixon, the gruff, unyielding veteran, warmed the crowd with his fiery, straight talk. But it was the young Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., standing at the pulpit, who articulated the spiritual and moral core of the movement. He was the newest face, yet his voice carried an authority far beyond his years. Dr. King spoke not merely of a boycott, but of a sacred duty. He laid out the philosophical foundation of their struggle: nonviolent direct action. He urged the people to meet hate with love, violence with peace, and injustice with an unwavering commitment to dignity. His words resonated with the deeply held Christian faith of the community, framing the protest not as a political maneuver, but as a moral crusade for justice. "We are here this evening," King declared, "for serious business. We are tired of being kicked about by the brutal feet of oppression." His rhetoric was soaring, connecting their local struggle on a Montgomery bus to the universal human quest for freedom. He charged them with maintaining a spirit of Christian love even toward their adversaries, demanding that they keep their hands clean and their souls pure. The MIA leadership proposed a set of moderate demands: courteous treatment by bus operators, seats to be filled on a first-come, first-served basis, with black people filling seats from the back forward, and the employment of black bus drivers on black routes. The demands were read, discussed, and then put to a vote. The roar of agreement was deafening, a communal commitment that solidified the ongoing boycott. The movement had found its voice, a magnificent blend of legal strategy, economic leverage, and profound spiritual grounding. The Montgomery Improvement Association, MA, officially voted to extend the protest indefinitely, until their demands were met. The one-day demonstration had transformed overnight into a sustained, citywide act of resistance that would test the endurance of everyone involved. Chapter 6: The Long Walk for Freedom. The indefinite boycott meant that the fundamental challenge was logistics. How do you sustain a citywide transportation strike when the majority of participants are working-class people who must travel daily to and from their jobs in white neighborhoods? The answer was found in extraordinary sacrifice and meticulous, grassroots organization. The heart of the solution was the carpool system. The MIA quickly organized a vast, complex network of over 300 private cars and church station wagons. This operation ran like a military drill, with dispatchers at various locations communicating via two-way radios to coordinate pickups and drop-offs. The black community's own vehicles became the arteries of their defiance. Imagine the sight: hundreds of cars, driven by volunteers, ferrying thousands of people back and forth, silently asserting their independence on the very streets that once symbolized their segregation. But many still had to walk, often for miles, regardless of the weather. Day after day, through the chill of winter and the heat of spring, they walked. They wore out shoes, they endured taunts, and they faced physical exhaustion, but they did not break. The image of elderly women, domestic workers, and young students walking with purpose became the most powerful visual of the boycott, a quiet, constant refusal to ride the symbol of their oppression. This communal sacrifice fostered an incredible sense of solidarity. Walking together became an act of fellowship and mutual encouragement. People shared rides, packed lunches for neighbors, and looked out for each other against the increasingly aggressive harassment from white segregationists. The boycott was a powerful economic strike against the bus company, but it was also a spiritual and psychological liberation for the participants. The financial pressure on the bus company was immediate and severe. Ridership plummeted by about 75%, and the company began hemorrhaging thousands of dollars a day. The city government, desperate to break the will of the protesters, refused to negotiate in good faith. Instead, they resorted to punitive measures, aiming to cripple the MIA's carpool system through legal intimidation and harassment. Chapter 7: Retaliation and Resilience. As the weeks turned into months, the initial surprise of the white power structure gave way to furious retaliation. The city government saw the boycott not as a legitimate protest, but as an illegal conspiracy. Their primary target was the carpool system, which they correctly identified as the lifeblood of the movement. Police began harassing and ticketing drivers in the pool, citing minor or fabricated infractions. One of the most effective tools of intimidation was the law. In February 1956, a grand jury indicted over 80 leaders of the MIA, including Dr. King and E.D. Nixon, for violating an obscure 1921 anti-boycott statute that prohibited conspiring to hinder a lawful business without just cause. This sweeping legal action was designed to strike fear into the hearts of the community and dismantle the leadership. The arrests, however, had the opposite effect. When Dr. King surrendered to the authorities, he was treated like a hero. Crowds gathered, cheers erupted, and the mood was one of fierce pride, not fear. It's hard to believe, but the tactic of mass arrest gave the movement its first international headlines, drawing attention and sympathy from around the world. The image of dignified black leaders willingly submitting to a prejudiced justice system only strengthened their moral position. The retaliation also escalated to violence and terrorism. Homes of MIA leaders were targeted. On January 30, 1956, Dr. King's parsonage was bombed while his wife, Coretta Scott King, and their baby daughter were inside. 2 days later, E.D. Nixon's home was also attacked. These acts were meant to terrorize the leaders into submission and break the boycott's momentum. Yet, each act of violence was met with non-violent resolve. After the bombing of his home, Dr. King stood on his porch, addressing the furious crowd that had gathered, urging them to put down their weapons. His message was clear: we must love our white brothers, no matter what they do to us. This steadfast adherence to non-violence in the face of terror was a moral victory, positioning the boycotters as the victims of hatred, but the masters of their own spiritual response. Chapter 8: The Courts Intervene. Recognizing that local negotiations and direct action were being countered by overwhelming legal and physical intimidation, the MIA and their legal team decided to shift the battleground. On February 1, 1956, a separate legal challenge was filed in the U.S. District Court. This case, known as Browder v. Gale, was a direct constitutional assault on the segregation laws themselves. The lawsuit argued that the city ordinance requiring segregation on buses was a blatant violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. The lawsuit was filed on behalf of 5 black women: Aurelia S. Browder, Susie McDonald, Claudette Colvin, Mary Louise Smith, and Janetta Reese, who had personally endured humiliating or abusive treatment on Montgomery buses. This strategy moved beyond simply changing the seating policy; it challenged the very principle of separate but equal, which had been the legal foundation for segregation since the 1896 Supreme Court ruling in Plessy v. Ferguson. The legal team aimed for a ruling that would apply not just to Montgomery, but to the entire nation. The legal maneuvering bought the movement time and provided a focus outside of the city government's control. While the boycott continued to grind down the bus company financially, the lawyers worked methodically to present the evidence that segregation was inherently unequal and unconstitutional. The city continued its desperate fight, attempting to maintain the status quo through harassment and legal action aimed at the carpool system. The city, frustrated by the ongoing economic damage and the resilience of the protesters, secured a state court injunction on November 13, 1956, declaring the MIA's carpool operation an illegal private enterprise and effectively ordering it to cease operations immediately. This was a devastating blow. The leaders knew that without organized transportation, the boycott, now nearly 11 months old, would collapse overnight. The crowd at the mass meeting that evening was somber, heavy with the weight of potential defeat, yet gathered for a final word from their leader. Dr. King stood to speak, his voice thick with the gravity of the moment, preparing the community for the possibility of returning to the buses under the old, cruel rules, perhaps thinking of a strategic pause to regroup. But at that very moment, a messenger rushed forward, clutching a piece of paper. The message was quickly handed to Dr. King. He paused, read the telegram, and his entire demeanor shifted from resignation to triumph. The messenger had brought news from Washington, D.C. Earlier that day, the Supreme Court of the United States had issued its unanimous decision in Browder v. Gale. The court affirmed the lower court ruling, declaring that the segregation of buses in Montgomery, Alabama, was unconstitutional. The legal basis of Jim Crow on public transit was, with one fell swoop, erased. The news was met with an explosion of ecstatic, joyful noise that swallowed the church whole, the people leaping to their feet in disbelief and celebration. The legal victory came on the very same day the city had attempted its final act of suppression. This convergence was seen by many as divine providence, a validation of their faith and endurance. The long, brutal walk had culminated not merely in policy changes, but in a constitutional declaration that recognized their inherent equality. The bus system was legally defeated, but the battle for the full, non-violent implementation of justice had only just begun. Chapter 9: Victory and the Battle for Implementation. The Supreme Court ruling was the legal end of the boycott, but the leaders knew that laws alone do not change hearts or habits. They were acutely aware that the transition to an integrated transit system would be fraught with danger. The MIA, under Dr. King's guidance, chose to delay their return for over a month, using the time for intensive preparation and education. They held workshops, teaching the boycotters the philosophy and practical application of nonviolence. Role-playing sessions simulated hostile encounters on the buses, training participants how to react calmly to insults, threats, and even physical assaults. The message was firm: dignity, peace, and love must be their response, ensuring that the first day of integration was conducted with impeccable, nonviolent grace. Finally, on December 21, 1956, 381 days after Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, the Montgomery bus boycott officially ended. At dawn, black citizens, including Dr. King and E.D. Nixon, boarded the city buses. They sat where they chose, often side by side with white passengers, in a monumental display of newfound freedom. News cameras documented the scene, capturing the quiet revolution in action. The immediate reaction from segregationists was venomous and, predictably, violent. Shootings were reported at buses, and city leaders struggled to maintain order. The White Citizens Council issued defiant threats. Within weeks of the integration, a series of bombings targeted for black churches and the homes of two MIA leaders, including that of Reverend Ralph Abernathy. Terrorism was their last, desperate response to legal defeat. Despite the renewed violence, the integrated riding continued. The boycotters, armed with their commitment to non-violence and their legal victory, did not retreat. Their sustained, peaceful presence on the buses eventually won the day. The economic reality for the bus company, coupled with the futility of fighting a Supreme Court order, forced the city to grudgingly accept the change. The victory was complete, purchased by the resilience and unity of an entire community. Chapter 10: The Legacy of the 381 Days. The Montgomery bus boycott lasted over a year, a marathon of faith and endurance that fundamentally changed the trajectory of the civil rights movement. It demonstrated, for the first time on a massive scale, the transformative power of economic pressure combined with nonviolent direct action. It was a blueprint for the protests, sit-ins, and freedom rides that would follow across the South. Crucially, the boycott launched Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. onto the national and international stage. His eloquence, his moral authority, and his unwavering commitment to nonviolence made him the recognized philosophical and spiritual leader of the movement. The Montgomery Improvement Association became the model for future organizing, proving that unity between the clergy, the activists, and the working class was unstoppable. The profound change was not just in the law, but in the people themselves. Black citizens of Montgomery had shed the psychological shackles of segregation. They had walked in defiance, discovered their collective strength, and earned a victory through communal suffering and sacrifice. Their courage was contagious, inspiring millions across the country to demand their own equality. The story of the boycott is often simplified to the single, iconic moment of Rosa Parks's refusal. While her action was the match, the 381 days of sustained unity were the slow, controlled burn that consumed the old order. It was the resilience of the grandmothers who walked, the bravery of the young students, and the dedication of the volunteers that secured the victory, proving that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary change when they act as one. The Montgomery bus boycott was a turning point. It signaled the end of the long era of quiet submission and ushered in a new, demanding age where the fight for civil rights would be waged openly, relentlessly, and with a moral force that the segregationists simply could not match. The foundation had been poured, the architecture of a more just America was beginning to take shape. Closing summary. We reflect now on the cold December day when a seamstress decided she had walked the path of compliance for the last time. The Montgomery bus boycott was a testament to the power of collective moral courage. It was the ultimate demonstration that oppression can only survive if the oppressed choose to participate in their own degradation. When an entire community withdraws its consent, the foundations of injustice crumble. The sacrifices were immense, the lost wages, the aching feet, the fear of violence, the bombs dropped on homes. Yet, in enduring those trials, the people of Montgomery discovered a profound truth, that their dignity was not something granted by a bus driver or a city council, but an inherent quality that could not be taken away. They chose love over hate, patience over violence, and saw their spiritual commitment validated by constitutional law. The lessons echo across generations. The boycott teaches us that true progress is a marathon, not a sprint, requiring unity, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to principle. It reminds us that every great social change begins with individuals making small, resolute decisions, the decision to sit down, the decision to stand up, and the decision to walk forward together. May we always remember the feet that walked, the voices that spoke, and the moral clarity that prevailed. Their story is a perpetual flame, lighting the way for all who seek justice and peace in the human experience. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If you made it this far, you're the reason we keep going. Please subscribe and help us continue sharing these stories with the world.